Hello again, it's good to be back on the show. We are starting with the biggest headline in the world right now. Elon Musk is taking over Twitter. He's been called a lot of things: controversial, visionary, crazy genius, disruptor. He's also a pro at making a splash. This deal was a while in the making. Twitter resisted it. Its CEO is no fan of Musk. The sentiment, we understand, is mutual. He may be among the first to be fired, and his exit may be among the first changes that Musk makes at Twitter. He's got a long list, apparently, and he wants the company all to himself, no shareholders. He claims to be a champion of free speech. Unfortunately, the pitch has not found many takers. Headlines say all of this in so many words, that this takeover is bad for free speech, and it's no rocket science to understand why. Interestingly, Twitter is not the biggest or the most popular social media company. So why is this takeover making such a lot of news? Because A, Elon Musk, and B, Twitter is the platform of choice for influencers, policymakers, world leaders. And it is this influence that Musk is buying, and he's paying $5 billion more than the market price for it. Why should you care? What does this takeover mean for you and me? On Gravitas tonight, that's what we'll discuss. Elon Musk is buying Twitter. A few days ago, it seemed unlikely. Only a few people took Musk seriously, and he himself sounded unsure. He said Twitter may not go for his deal. But on Monday, he made an offer that Twitter could not refuse. Elon Musk is paying a whopping $44 billion to buy Twitter. That's 38% more than Twitter's market price. Why is Musk paying this kind of money? What does he want to do with Twitter? He wants to overhaul it. It's not for nothing that he's called a disruptor. He has reinvented cars and sent a rocket into space. Twitter could see some major changes too. But will these changes be for the good? That's what the world is debating on Twitter and elsewhere. Tonight on Gravitas, we'll bring you our take on this. First, the basics. The deal was announced last evening. As of today, Twitter's market value is around $39 billion. Musk is paying $44 billion for it. That's $5 billion more than the market value. Well, he can afford it. Elon Musk, after all, is the world's richest man with a fortune worth $279 billion. The problem is that most of this money is tied up in his companies. So Musk had to arrange the funds from different sources. A clutch of banks are giving him $13 billion, and this is a loan. Then there's another loan of $12.5 billion. And for this, Elon Musk will put up his Tesla stock as collateral. That still leaves him short of another $21 billion to complete the takeover. Where will this money come from? $21 billion. Musk can put in his own money, or he can ask some existing shareholders to join his offer. Next question. Who owns Twitter right now? Around 40% of the company's shares are owned by mutual funds. Almost 37% are with institutional investors. A little over 12% are individual shareholders, and these can be either Twitter employees or individual investors who bought shares from the market, the retail investors. Once Elon Musk takes over this company, the retail investors could be bought out. Some big-ticket investors could stay. The rest of the shares will go to Elon Musk. Now, here's something that you should know. Twitter tried very hard to avoid this takeover. First, it adopted what is called a poison pill strategy. The company board offered existing shareholders more Twitter shares at a discount, and this was done to stop Musk from buying shares from the market. Remember, he already owns around 9% of this company, and for a brief period, Elon Musk was the biggest shareholder of Twitter. There were unverified reports about a potential second buyer. Twitter's board apparently sent out feelers to some potential candidates, but in the end, it was Musk who prevailed. His offer was accepted by the board yesterday. The transaction will be completed this year. The stockholders must approve it first. Then the company needs some regulatory approvals, but all of this is just a matter of formality. By the end of this year, 2022, Elon Musk will own Twitter. What happens next? Well, he wants to make some big changes. And here's the most important one. Twitter will cease to be a listed company. It will be private. What does that mean? Well, you and I and people like us will not be able to buy Twitter shares. The company will no longer be listed on the stock exchanges. It will truly be Elon Musk's Twitter. He also says he wants to protect free speech, and that's triggered a whole new debate. We'll take it up in a bit. But what's clear at this point is this: Elon Musk wants to fundamentally change Twitter, and not everyone is thrilled about the changes that he might bring. And this list includes Twitter CEO Parag Agrawal. He took the job last November. He has a new boss now. Agrawal held a town hall after the takeover was announced, and he did not sound optimistic. Let me quote from what he said. There is indeed uncertainty about what will happen after the deal closes. We don't have all the answers. This is a period of uncertainty. Does not sound very confident. Agrawal also said that there won't be any layoffs, not immediately at least. But will he keep his own job? That is the question. Elon Musk has been saying that he's not a fan of the current team, and this was not an off-the-cuff statement. Elon Musk said this in a filing to the Securities and Exchange Commission. And this commission is America's stock market regulator, and I have a copy of that filing with me. This is what Elon Musk said. If the deal does not work, given that I don't have confidence in the management, nor do I believe I can drive the necessary change in the public market, I would need to reconsider my position as a shareholder. Well, that won't be necessary now. He's much more than a shareholder. He'll own the company, so he can change the CEO. And there's a lot of buzz about this, about Parag Agrawal's exit, plus a $42 million severance package. But at this point, it's all speculation. I'm sure some of you are also wondering, why should we care about what happens at Twitter? After all, it's not the world's most popular social network, not by a long shot. It ranks 15th in the world in terms of monthly active users. It doesn't even make a lot of money. You see, internet platforms run on advertising. Twitter made around $5 billion from ads last year. Compare that to Google, $257 billion. Over 50 times more than Twitter. Facebook, $117 billion, over 20 times more than Twitter. So Elon Musk is not buying Twitter for its users or its earnings. He's buying Twitter for its influence. And that's why you should care. Twitter is the world's most powerful medium. Top influencers, decision makers, and policy makers are on this platform. World leaders are on Twitter. You could say Twitter is the town hall of world politics. So what Musk does with it could have far-reaching consequences. Well, so far he's got what he wanted. Twitter is now his personal town hall. The question is, what does he do with it? What will Elon's Twitter look like? Basically, we're looking at two kinds of changes. One is technical, the other is systemic, and both changes have their own set of problems. Let's start with the technical ones. Number one, lesser regulation. Musk calls himself a free speech absolutist. What does that mean? Well, you can say whatever you want, to whoever you want, whenever you want, no holds barred. Where does that leave hate speech and fake news? Frankly, nobody knows. Perhaps Musk will tweet about that soon to enlighten all of us. Number two, making the Twitter algorithm public. And this has been a long-standing demand. Right now, nobody knows how content spreads on Twitter. How do you see what you see on your timeline? How hate speech is flagged? How some tweets are amplified? Elon Musk plans to make this algorithm public. Change number three, a possible edit button. You may finally be able to fix your typos and mistakes. Again, the details of this feature are yet to be defined. Change number four, removing advertisements. Right now, 90% of Twitter's revenue comes from ads. For shareholders, this was an important issue. More revenue, more profits for them. But not anymore. Once Twitter goes private, there will be no shareholders' pressure. And as for revenue, Musk is hinting at a subscription model, sort of like Netflix or Spotify. You have to pay to be on Twitter. Change number five, a war on fake accounts. Elon Musk is planning to eliminate all bots from Twitter. Only accounts operated by humans will stay online. I know it sounds trivial, but it's very important. Bots are a major problem on Twitter. One study claims that 15% of Twitter accounts are automated bots. In Elon Musk's Twitter, bots may not exist. Well, these are the big changes that are lined up. None of it has been officially confirmed, though. We pieced these together from Elon Musk's thinking room, aka his Twitter account. Some of these changes sound good. like taking on bots or the edit button. Many users are also praising Musk's commitment to free speech, but that's precisely what he's looking for, some good press. You may or may not like Elon Musk, but you cannot deny one thing. He knows brand building, and Twitter helped Elon Musk build his brand of crazy genius. It's good PR. But beyond that, there are some ominous signs. Just think about it. Media shapes public opinion everywhere in the world. And who owns the biggest media platforms? I've got the list for you. Mark Zuckerberg, he owns Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. Jeff Bezos, he owns the Washington Post. Jack Ma owns the South China Morning Post. And now Elon Musk owns Twitter. Billionaires are controlling the global media landscape, and that has consequences. For starters, Musk is not a newsman. He runs other companies like Tesla and SpaceX. What if he uses Twitter to promote them or to arm twist policymakers? I ask this because he's tried this before. Do you remember his tweet? This tweet by Elon Musk. He blamed the government of India for Tesla's delayed entry into the country. Pretty soon it was trending here. Car lovers began pressuring the government, asking questions. They demanded a fast track for Tesla. And remember, back then, Musk was an ordinary Twitter user with a lot of followers, yes, but just another user. Now he owns the whole thing. What if he amplifies tweets about SpaceX? What if he removes tweets critical of his cars? The fact is, Elon Musk can do anything he wants with Twitter. There are no shareholders, no board members. It is now going to be a private fiefdom. And think about what that means. You may or may not use Twitter, but you know how powerful it is. Heads of state use Twitter to reach their people. Armies use Twitter to send out updates. Activists use Twitter to rally the public. Journalists use Twitter to keep people informed and to express opinion. Whether we like it or not, Twitter is powerful, powerful enough to shape global opinion. Pretty soon, that power will be wielded by one man, Elon Musk, and this raises an even more important question. Who controls Elon Musk? Amazon founder Jeff Bezos has an interesting answer. China. He says China controls Elon Musk. And this is what he tweeted earlier today. Did the Chinese government just gain a bit of leverage over the town square? Where did Bezos get the Chinese link? Because of Tesla's dependence on China. It is their second biggest market. It supplies most of their batteries. So Elon Musk needs to be on China's good books. And don't forget, China banned Twitter in 2009. With Elon Musk at the helm now, Beijing may feel more comfortable. Again, this is all conjecture. China, on their part, have dismissed these reports. But when such powerful platforms are involved, all possibilities must be explored, which is why states are equally important. They must keep a close eye on Twitter, on fake news, on hate speech, on propaganda, all of it. Because let's face it, our free speech is not guaranteed by a wannabe demigod/billionaire. It is guaranteed by our states, by our constitutions. So governments must work to ensure that Elon Musk's Twitter does not violate our rights. If not, this could be a downslide for social media. A platform owned, dominated, and rigged by one man. For now, all we can do is wait to see what Elon Musk plans to do with the loudest, unruliest, and most consequential town hall of our times. We're talking about the state's role in our lives. Sometimes they overstep. Sometimes their policies do more harm than good. Britain is debating one such policy. It's called the Prevent strategy. The name sort of explains itself, prevent. The goal of the strategy is to prevent people from being radicalized. It was implemented in 2006. Prevent identifies people who are vulnerable to radicalization. I know it sounds like a good idea, but think about this. Who decides if someone is vulnerable or not? Well, that's where Britain failed. Schools, hospitals, and local authorities were given this job. They had to identify so-called radical suspects. Guess who they identified? Some teachers reported primary school children. Apparently, they were waving toy guns around. Others reported teenagers playing violent video games. Long story short, Prevent did not prevent anything. Multiple terror attacks were carried out by people referred to Prevent. The 2017 London Bridge attack, the Parsons Green train bombing, even last year's attack on Tory MP David Ames. So if Prevent did not stop terrorism, what exactly did it achieve? Islamophobia. That's what Prevent ended up promoting. Last year, the government of the UK decided to review this strategy, not because of the Islamophobia, but because it failed to prevent the attacks. And this review has split the British public. One group wants an independent review. They want to remove anti-Muslim bias from Prevent. The other group is having none of it. They want the government to defend the Prevent scheme. And leading the second group is former Prime Minister David Cameron. He has taken a break from writing books to write an op-ed for The Times. Cameron asked the government to defend its anti-terror program. If not, they would be enabling terrorism, in his words. In fact, let me quote from what he wrote. Just as we need to counter the Islamist extremist narrative, we need to counter the anti-Prevent narrative. We need to show that delegitimizing counter-terrorism is in essence enabling terrorism. That is what David Cameron wrote. Strong words there, especially from a former Prime Minister. Let me break down what David Cameron just said. Britain must counter the anti-Prevent narrative. If you criticize Prevent, you're in essence enabling terrorism. And that's a big charge to make. And for the record, Muslims are not the only ones criticizing Prevent. Teachers' unions have rejected it. Even Tory MPs have sought to repeal some provisions. But successive prime ministers have refused to change it. Why? Because it reaffirms Britain's worst impulses, colonialism and white supremacy. Boris Johnson, too, has a chance to fix it. His Home Secretary has hinted at a possible overhaul of Prevent. But David Cameron's intervention changes things. You see, Boris Johnson and his cabinet are not exactly popular right now. First, the Wuhan virus pandemic and the way they handled it. Then the Partygate fiasco. A lot of Conservatives are gunning for Boris Johnson as we speak. Even his number two, Rishi Sunak, is under fire. Let me tell you what a recent Tory survey found. Rishi Sunak is the least popular cabinet minister in Britain. His ratings are minus 5.2. Beat that. Boris Johnson is third from the bottom. Ratings 6.6. Both men have been fined for attending lockdown parties, and chances are things could get worse. The much-awaited Sue Gray report into these parties will be published soon. And rumour is it is damning. In which case, Boris Johnson will find it hard to remain in office. And his much-hyped successor, Rishi Sunak, may sink with him. This political climate makes David Cameron's intervention very important. A, Boris Johnson cannot afford to antagonize more prime ministers. He's already lost Theresa May. Cameron could be next. And B, this could be a life raft for him. Boris Johnson has already used the war in Ukraine to outsmart the opposition. This anti-terror program could be the same. Could do the same. Either way, it exposes the real face of Europe's anti-terror campaign. It's all about political convenience, you see. We saw it in France. We're seeing it again in Britain. So review or not, Britain's policy remains a tainted one. And frankly, it all boils down to attitude. The West believes they're always right, that their democracy is perfect, their politicians are flawless, and everyone else deserves to be lectured. Britain may have started this trend, but their best friend, the US, is perfecting it. On Monday, the US published a report on religious freedoms around the world. No one asked them to, but they did it anyway. This report has two objectives. One is to detail religious rights in every country, and two is to recommend sanctions. For the third year in a row, this report has criticized India. Apparently, India is a country of particular concern. I'll read out what the report says. During the year, the Indian government escalated its promotion and enforcement of policies, including those promoting a Hindu nationalist agenda that negatively affects Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, Dalits, and other religious minorities. Sweeping, unsolicited statements. The question is, do they affect US policy? Well, technically, no. This report is prepared by the USCIRF, or the United States Commission on International Religious Freedoms, and this is not a part of the State Department, but it does recommend policy to the US government. Washington may or may not accept them. In 2020 and 2021, the previous 2 years, they ignored the recommendation to sanction India. Chances are they'll do the same again this year. But is that enough? The US calls India a natural strategic partner, yet America's own Federal Commission is demonizing India year after year, not once or twice, but 3 consecutive times. It is calling for India to be blacklisted, for Indian officials to be sanctioned. Such baseless reports are problematic on 3 counts. 1, nobody asked for them. Who exactly left America in charge of the world? Nobody interferes in their politics, so maybe Washington should try and do the same. Problem number 2, guess which country is exempt from this report? The United States of America. American hate crimes are not mentioned in this report. South Asia is mentioned. West Asia is criticized. Even US allies in Europe have a dedicated chapter, but not a single word on the US. What explains this exemption? After all, this report is on international religious freedoms. So technically, every country should be investigated. But since they did not, we did our own research. And here's what we found. In 2021, hate crimes surged 44% in major US cities. Anti-Asian crimes were up 342%, 342%. Some of these incidents were motivated by religion. Just this month, 2 Sikh men were attacked in New York. Maybe next year's report can mention that. Problem number 3, the repeated obsession with demonizing India. 15 countries have been listed as countries of particular concern. Take a look at this list. Afghanistan, Myanmar, Pakistan, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Syria, China. These are some of the countries on that list. And India is part of that list. Some of these countries are Islamic republics. Some are ruled by the army. Some are ruled by terror outfits. How can India possibly feature on a list like this? The fact is, this report is not about religious freedoms. It's about America's uncontrollable urge to preach. And that urge has been hijacked by radical elements. Hence the repeated attacks on India. Reports say the US Commission, this US Commission, has been penetrated by anti-India elements. The likes of IAMC or the Indian American Muslim Council. It was founded by Sheikh Obed, a man linked to the Jamaat-e-Islami Pakistan. In 2013, they hired lobbyists to do their dirty work. A firm called Fidelis Government Relations. And it worked. The next year, the US Commission on Religious Freedom started using a new map for India. This one excluded Jammu and Kashmir, Ladakh and Arunachal Pradesh. Simply put, it's a dedicated campaign and a dangerous one because India-US relations are at a crucial juncture. If Washington is serious about building a partnership with India, these lectures must stop. Unfortunately, the signs are not good. First came a warning from Antony Blinken. He says he's concerned about the human rights situation in India. Then the US president jumped in. On Friday, he said India is facing its own problems. He did not bother to explain, but Biden was talking about democracies and autocracies, so you can imagine the context. And now you have this baseless report. You see, partners trust each other to manage their own affairs. They do not lecture, they do not sanction, and they do not judge. It's a lesson that the US is yet to learn. And there's more from the United States. The White House is threatening the Solomon Islands. This is a small Pacific nation that is becoming the new flashpoint between China and the West. Solomon Islands has signed a security deal with China. We've been telling you about this. The details are yet to be shared with the world. But Washington says it will retaliate if China sets up a military base in the Pacific. In Australia, the defense minister said they should prepare for war. Why is Solomon Islands evoking such strong reactions, and what is China up to? Our next report has the answers.
China building a military base in Solomon is fake news made up by people with ulterior motives.
China remains firm in its denial, as does America in its accusation. Washington is convinced that Beijing is building a military base in the Solomon Islands, and it says it is ready to respond accordingly. This is America's message, and this is the story so far. The Solomon Islands signed a security deal with China. The details of the deal are not known. A draft agreement was leaked on the 1st of April. It hinted at a possible Chinese military base in the South Pacific. None of this comes as a surprise. The Solomon Islands has been tilting towards China for a while. In 1993, the US closed its embassy in Honiara. In 2019, the Solomons broke ties with Taiwan. 3 years later, the small island nation has become the latest flashpoint between China and the West. Why do you think this deal has alarmed the West? 1, because its location is strategic. 2, Because if China really builds a base in the island nations, you would have the PLA just 2,000 kilometers from Australian shores. One look at this map and the implications become clear. The Solomon Islands give China the access to the entire Pacific. This changes the power balance in the region. China continues to insist that this is all fake news.
China building a military base in Solomon is fake news made up by people with ulterior motives. I have noticed that the United States and Australia have accused the security cooperation between China and Solomon Islands of lacking transparency. But the US-UK-Australia Trilateral Security Partnership Agreement, AUKUS, is an undisclosed and opaque black box operation. When will the United States, the United Kingdom and Australia intend to hand over AUKUS to regional countries, including the South Pacific Island countries, for deliberation?
The world doesn't trust the dragon. The US and Japan have rushed to the Solomons. They've extracted assurances. No long-term Chinese presence, no power projection capabilities. That's the promise that the Solomon Islands has made to America and Japan. But here's the problem. The leaked draft points at provisions permitting China to make ship visits to carry a logistical replenishment in and have stopover and transaction in the Solomon Islands. So, who do you believe? For the longest time, Australia believed this region was its turf. Well, not anymore. Prime Minister Scott Morrison says that China's involvement in the Solomon Islands is a red line. The Defence Minister has gone a step ahead. He says Australia should prepare for war.
And speaking of war and peace, I want to share with you a snippet from a very interesting discussion I had earlier today. We were at the Raisina Dialogues. It's the flagship summit of India's Ministry of External Affairs. In conversation with me were some very interesting speakers. There was Teodoro L. Locsin Jr., Secretary of Foreign Affairs from the Philippines, Carl Bildt, the former Prime Minister of Sweden, Stephen Harper, the former Prime Minister of Canada, Bijayant Panda, the National Vice President of the Bharatiya Janata Party, and Jane Hall-Lute, former Deputy Secretary of Department of Homeland Security of the US. And we were talking about liberalism in today's context. Naturally, the conversation pivoted towards the war in Ukraine. Someone said, Russia's invasion of Ukraine marks a return to the 1930s. Another speaker said countries always pursue national interest and it's nothing to be embarrassed about. Listen in. What does the war in Ukraine mean for the liberal order? Is it a proof of its demise or is it the opportunity for its revival? Does the world see this war as a demonstration of what the alternative to liberalism would be? And if yes, what explains the victory of Viktor Orban in Hungary or the rising popularity of Marine Le Pen even though she lost the election?
What's at stake right now is not whether you focus on liberalism or you focus on democracy. What's at stake is the definition of we. Who exactly is the we we're talking about? And what we are seeing increasingly, whether it's in autocratic regimes or in movements that are reacting to an overreach, whether of the progressives or what are termed liberals, they are redefining the we. And in many cases, in my view, it is very much the 1930s again.
You want to talk about the 1930s. This is actually the 1930s. This is essentially a fascistic nationalist government in Russia invading a neighbor with total disregard for any kind of legal framework, international or otherwise, and trying to deny its right to nationhood. As I say, that is the 1930s over again, and there is a tendency for us, because Ukraine was or is a democracy, an imperfect democracy, but Ukraine's certainly democracy, Russia is certainly not. There's a tendency for us to say, well, now this conflict is between democracy and authoritarianism. And certainly in Europe and certainly in the West, we have seen, I think, a revival of the notion of shared values and what that really means when we face something like Vladimir Putin's government.
Carl Bildt, your comments on the need to dispense with hypocrisy.
Well, others have been sinning in the past, so we have the right to be sinners now. Well, you never become a saint by the sins of others. And that is also why it's so important to react when nations suddenly sort of opt out of the system, say that we don't respect fundamental rules of the international games, and the most fundamental rule of the game is that you don't invade other countries, you respect the territorial integrity. Then you must react.
I'm going to put this in the context of something you mentioned a little bit earlier. First and foremost, we have to engage with and dispense with hypocrisy. When nations who buy more energy from Russia in an afternoon feel free to moralize to nations who buy less than that in a month, they may be playing to their own audience, but there are billions of people who will not buy into that.
If Taiwan is getting threatened by China directly through the military way or through different methods, will the world democracies stand with Taiwan?
You may see democracies more likely to unite when their national interests are threatened. You're discussing using Russia to beat down China. So what we're talking about really are national interests, and that's not anything to be embarrassed about.
And staying with wars, we're still fighting one against the virus from China. New infections are growing. India has decided to now extend its vaccination drive to children, younger children. 2 shots have been approved, Covaxin and Corbevax. Covaxin is for 5 to 12 years old. Corbevax is for 6 to 12 years old, 12-year-olds. Most of India's adult population has already been vaccinated. This month, booster shots were open to all adults. So the children were the only ones who did not have any protection. Recently, schools reopened. Almost immediately, new cases were detected. Some schools had to, in fact, shut down again. So India is finally vaccinating children. Better late than never, we say. More than 100 countries are vaccinating children. Some are giving shots to kids as young as 2. Even Cuba and Venezuela are on this list. So India has been late to roll out shots to children. It's about time. There are also growing fears of a 4th wave. In recent weeks, new infections have jumped. India's 7-day average has crossed the 2,000 mark. On the 15th of April, new cases have dropped to below 1,000. So the numbers have doubled. But they're not alarming. Vaccines have protected us. They did so during the last wave. Only 5 to 10% of the patients in India had to be hospitalized. And this is compelling evidence. The shots do work. So if your child qualifies, do give them the shot. Otherwise, we risk going the China way, where things are going from bad to worse. The outbreak in Shanghai has not ebbed. Health officials are resorting to some extreme measures. This includes caging patients in their homes. And I'm not exaggerating. Fences have been erected outside apartments. That's how China is dealing with the Wuhan virus, by installing fences. Public anger is growing. I want you to look at this. Residents are dismantling the fences. They're angry with the Communist Party and zero COVID. Despite the public outrage, China continues to swear by it, and this is putting lives at risk. In Shanghai's Pudong, a fire broke out at an apartment. The firefighters could not help the people trapped because health authorities had installed fences that sealed the entrance. Well, that's what you get with authoritarianism. Shanghai is unable to get its outbreak under control. Now, new hotspots are emerging. Beijing is one of them, the capital of China. More than 20 million people will be tested in Beijing. 70 new cases were reported in Beijing on Monday. But as we always say, you can never trust China's data. Even the residents of Beijing have their doubts. They fear a Shanghai-style lockdown could be imposed on them. So they're rushing to supermarkets. They're hoarding essentials. So draconian lockdowns, ineffective mass tests and unsuccessful vaccines. China held up its pandemic playbook as an example for the world to follow. There's hardly anything scientific about China's response. And despite these failures, Beijing is doubling down on the same model, pushing the same model. In fact, the Communist Party remains obsessed with zero COVID, while the people of China continue to suffer. Now, this is the month of April, the second half of it, the season of college admissions in many parts of the world, the season to embark on a new life. Students are looking at their options. They're praying night and day for their dream college. Well, if you're one of them, and if you happen to be in India, then we have news for you. An important advisory from the UGC, the University Grants Commission, that's India's top education regulatory body. It's responsible for coordinating, determining and maintaining standards of higher education in the country. The UGC has issued a guideline for students, a public notice on their choice of college. The message is quite simple. Do not go to Pakistan. That's what the UGC is telling students in India. Don't pursue higher education in Pakistan. Well, are you surprised? At least we were. Why would a student from India, which has some stellar institutions, want to study in Pakistan, a country which has the world's weakest higher education system? Well, turns out there are some students who do go to Pakistan. In September 2020, when Pakistan suspended its lockdown and reopened educational institutions, there were more than 300 Indian students who crossed the border to take their exams. And most of them were from Jammu and Kashmir. In July 2021, the figure dropped, the number dropped. The Ministry of External Affairs released this data in the Rajya Sabha, the upper house of parliament in India. It said there were at least 230 Indian students in Pakistan. Well, critics say that this data does not give the full picture. This is Nasir Ehami, the president of Jammu and Kashmir Students Association. He's been quoted in media reports claiming that there are about 1,000 students from Kashmir who are pursuing higher education in Pakistan. And these are all claims. Now, I know the questions that you must be thinking of right now. What are they studying in Pakistan and why are they there in the first place? Well, most of these students are pursuing medical courses, MBBS, dental science, microbiology, a host of things. Next question, why are they studying in Pakistan? Because they receive scholarships from Pakistan, fully funded courses by Islamabad. On what basis are these scholarships awarded? On the basis of academic excellence? On the basis of merit? Well, not really. These scholarships are awarded on the basis of goodwill. Or so we're told. What sort of goodwill? Well, no one knows. All we have is figures. In February 2020, Pakistan announced 1,600 scholarships for some Indian students. Some of them were taken up. The UGC wants to put an end to this practice. On your screen is a copy of their advisory, and this is what it says. All concerned are advised not to travel to Pakistan for pursuing higher education. Any Indian national or overseas citizen of India who intends to take admission to any degree college or educational institution of Pakistan shall not be eligible for seeking employment or higher studies in India. The message is quite simple. If you're an Indian citizen who has obtained a degree from Pakistan, you won't get a job in India and your degree will not be recognized. Is this advisory the first of its kind? Well, no. In 2019, the UGC issued a similar advisory. It cautioned Indian students against taking admission in Pakistan. Evidently, it was ignored. Then in 2020, the Medical Council of India cautioned Indian students against pursuing courses in Pakistan. That too was ignored. Now, here's the thing. Every Indian student is free to make his or her choice. They have the right to decide where they want to study. This, after all, is just an advisory. It's not binding. But opting for a course in Pakistan, accepting scholarships, can be problematic, and I don't need to tell you why, but I will. Pakistan does not consider India a friend. It never has. It never might. It has fought 4 wars with India and pushed terror into India. It has tried to radicalize Indian youth. So when students from India, and that too from Jammu and Kashmir, a part that Pakistan wants to take away from India, are offered scholarships by Islamabad, there's every reason to be skeptical. In the past, there have been several instances of students going to Pakistan and returning indoctrinated. Reports say some were even used by the ISI for their nefarious plans in India. So there's reason to doubt the intentions here. That's all I'm going to say tonight. Let's take a look at what else is making news across the world. This is Gravitas Global Headlines.
An explosion at a university campus in southern Pakistan has killed 3 Chinese nationals and their Pakistani driver. Police say a suicide bomber was behind the attack. Volunteers helped people evacuate from a frontline neighborhood in Kharkiv as the Russian bombardment in the area continued. According to the volunteers, more than 1,000 people are currently living in the basements without electricity, gas or water. A Russian court has asked Facebook and Instagram's parent company Meta and video platform TikTok to pay fines of more than $50,000 for refusing to take down LGBT content. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has said the country will rapidly accelerate the development of its nuclear arsenal, while overseeing a vast military parade showcasing North Korea's most powerful intercontinental ballistic missiles. A delegation of foreign policy aides to South Korea's president-elect Yoon Suk-yeol met Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida as the two sides aim to mend long-strained ties. Yoon Suk-yeol is set to take over as South Korea's president on the 10th of May. As per Russian authorities, a fire engulfed an oil storage facility in Bryansk in western Russia. Social media videos showed huge columns of smoke rising into the sky. According to Russian state TV, no casualties were reported and the fire had been contained. El Salvador's Congress has now approved a month-long extension of emergency measures that rights groups say infringe civil liberties. The president, Nayib Bukele, however, has said that the extension of emergency powers is necessary to combat the surge in gang killings in the country. Firefighters across the United States are battling multiple wildfires, with dry conditions and high winds whipping up flames from Arizona to Florida. Meanwhile, at least one person has been killed and 15 firefighters have been injured in a wildfire in rural southwestern Nebraska. Novak Djokovic can defend his Wimbledon title after organizers said players who are not vaccinated against COVID-19 will be allowed to compete. The world number one barred from playing the Australian Open due to his vaccination status. The Boston Celtics have completed a 4-0 series sweep over the Brooklyn Nets to reach the NBA Eastern Conference semi-finals. The second-seeded Celtics beat the Nets 116-112 in New York to end Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving's season.
That is a wrap. We're leaving you with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.